Come now into the earthborn rainforest. Leave all your cares behind. Let us sit and share together the secrets of OJAYA, the martial art of deep meditation. Ancient secrets to happiness and success. The power of inner peace. The way of the lotus-hearted hero. Enter now this space of peace and listen heart to heart as you advance another step in the OJAYA martial art. Let us begin with a moment of repose. And now, the teachings.
OJAYA. MINDTRAPS with Sukaishi David.
The other day, I was talking with someone and I happened to mention that our next session with you here in the rainforest would be about the teachings of Eckhart Tolle. And this person said to me, "Oh, don't talk about Eckhart Tolle. I like Eckhart Tolle." This reaction surprised me. What this person was really saying was, I like Eckhart Tolle. Don't disturb any of the ideas I've learned from him. Don't say anything against what he teaches. This is what this person was really trying to say. Please don't disturb any of those ideas because I've already invested myself into those ideas and I don't want to find out if there's something wrong there. Now, this is what we call a do not disturb mentality. Do not disturb what I think. Do not disturb what I believe. This do not disturb mentality is the opposite of a truth seeker. A truth-seeking mentality is very different. A truth seeker would say, "Oh, you're going to talk about Eckhart Tolle? I've seen him on TV. What do you think of his teaching?" This is a truth seeker mentality. Someone who wants to hear a different perspective so they can weigh that new perspective against what they've already heard. But someone with a do not disturb mentality doesn't want to talk about it. And this person did not even ask any question. No interest to find out if there could be any issues with Eckhart Tolle's teachings. Instead, this person basically put up a sign, "Do not disturb." Here in our school of OJAYA, the do not disturb mentality doesn't take us very far. We like to explore and understand what's going on around us, so that we can see the pluses and minuses out there and learn from them. Here in our school, whatever you think, whatever you believe, is definitely going to be challenged. We don't ask you to believe in anything. We don't ask you to change your mind on anything. We don't ask you to accept anything that's said here if it doesn't make sense to you. But as you continue further in the OJAYA training, whatever you think will definitely be challenged. OJAYA is really for two types of people. Those who are brave and those who want to be brave. And gradually, the do not disturb me people will drop off. A truth seeker is always eager to hear a new perspective. A truth seeker wants to put whatever they know to the test. A truth seeker is not afraid to have their ideas challenged. Instead, a truth seeker is happy whenever they can step up to a new, higher way of understanding, right? So let's take a quick look at Eckhart Tolle and some of his teachings. Eckhart Tolle is famous for his book, The Power of Now. Oprah made him very famous. She said that when she read Eckhart's book, his ideas really made her think. Oprah constantly tries many things and she shares them with people. She likes to do this. She likes to look deeper, to explore new ways to help people. And she read Eckhart's book and she was intrigued. And of course, whoever comes close to Oprah can become very famous. When I've heard Oprah interview Eckhart, she's so brilliant. She asks all the right questions. The only problem is, she seems to accept all his answers. Eckhart's philosophy is all about how to live in the now, the power of now. We've already talked a lot about the now in this course, haven't we? We've had a number of sessions about this idea of living in the now. And now we want to dive a little deeper. So we need to remember what we've already learned in our previous sessions. We need to remember our session about your robotic mind. Remember that one? And we need to remember the points about living from your depth and inner awakening. Remember we said that as you continue to meditate, the deeper levels of your consciousness become enlivened and awakened. And we explained how you begin to live from your depth. And we also talked about the Emperor's new present moment. We found out why trying to be intensely present while you're drinking your tea is not going to lead you to depth of consciousness. And another session was called See Beyond the Now. Because we said that higher consciousness is not a matter of being in the now, but instead higher consciousness is about seeing beyond the now. This idea of living in the now has a lot of popular appeal. On the surface, it seems to make some sort of sense. But where did Eckhart Tolle get his teachings of the power of now? Well, Eckhart explains that for a long time he was going through some pretty hard times with a lot of heavy emotions, anxiety, depression. And then one day, his mind just settled down into a space of relative quietness. It was a rather dramatic change for him. Sound familiar? We've talked a lot about this. This is a very genuine experience. And sometimes this can happen to someone even if they don't meditate. He's a very genuine person, and he's telling you of his real experience. But the issue here is not about his experience. Our issue now is with the teachings that he's evolved after he had his experience. So straight off the bat, we can say that Eckhart's experience is genuine, no question about it. But we have to again remind ourselves that when someone has a great inner experience, that experience is not the end-all and be-all. There are many, many levels of experiences of higher consciousness that go far, far beyond whatever Eckhart Tolle has described. And this is where so many people go off track. When someone like Eckhart Tolle talks about some great inner experience, then people grab onto that person and they start to believe that this person must be the most enlightened being and that whatever he says is the absolute truth. But this is not the case at all. Different people have different levels of experience, different levels of understanding, and different levels of training. Eckhart tells us that he had no training, and he himself didn't even understand his experiences at first. He didn't have a teacher. He says that he himself was mystified as to what this new experience was all about. And it was only after he started to research various Eastern teachings that he began to formulate a framework to explain his own experiences. And then over time, he devised his own methods for how you too can live in the now and how you too can rise to that same level of experience. So yes, Eckhart Tolle had an experience, but the fact is, he had no idea how or why this experience came to him. He wasn't practicing any meditation or any other method. He himself did not know the subtle factors that were happening deep within him that would later create this kind of experience. And just because he had this experience does not make him an expert in understanding that experience. But people just automatically assume that somehow this guy knows how to get them to the similar experience. And this is the big mistake. Now, Eckhart is a highly intelligent person. It seems like a lot of Germans are naturally highly intelligent. It may be a stereotype, but it seems like Germans tend to be very meticulous and intelligent. We have two incredible German pianos here, and one of them is over here in the rainforest. The workmanship of a German piano is fantastic. But you know, many times people with high intelligence have a tendency to overthink things. Eckhart's ideas are so cerebral that if you have the patience to listen to them and understand them, your mind can easily become entangled in a web of concepts and ideas, so much so that you can become lost in those ideas. There's a saying in the East, it takes a thorn to remove a thorn. If someone has gotten entangled in a lot of complicated concepts, then it may take some other new complicated concepts to detangle all that. Here in our school, we don't like complicated concepts. Our teachings are very simple, as you know. But what's not so simple is when you have to detangle other people's complications. So now we're going to dive in and detangle some of Eckhart's thinking and show you a much simpler and tremendously more effective approach to higher consciousness. And along the way, we're going to also find that Eckhart gives out some dangerous advice to people. Yes, I said dangerous. You'll see why later in this session. Now here in our school, we're interested in the practices, the methods. We're not going to review Eckhart's book, The Power of Now. It's a very heady book, full of concepts that might make your head spin. We don't want to make our head spin. We're interested to see Eckhart's methods. So instead of reviewing his book, The Power of Now, we'll take a look inside his other book called Practicing the Power of Now. That sounds practical, doesn't it? We want to understand the practices. And right away, on page 11, we see him write, "For those readers who felt daunted or overwhelmed by the power of now, this book can serve as an introduction." That's right. People felt daunted and overwhelmed by his Power of Now book because it's incredibly heady, full of mind stuff, full of intellectual concepts. In fact, this is one reason for the book's success. When people's heads start to spin, when a concept is hard for people to grasp, they start to believe it's profound. Always be on the lookout for profound ideas, profound nonsense. Don't be too quick to adopt ideas that sound like some sort of guru speak. Right now, let's get practical. We're really interested here in what Eckhart tells people to do. What methods does he want you to practice? Let's turn some pages and see. Here on page 21, we start to see his main philosophy of living in the now. He says, "Focus your attention into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment." Well, how do you do that? He says, in your everyday life, you can practice this. For example, every time you walk up and down the stairs, pay close attention to every step. Be totally present. We've talked about these stairs so many times in our sessions, it seems like a recurring theme here, doesn't it? There's one famous teacher who told Oprah that whenever she goes up the stairs, she should be aware of each and every stair as she walks up the stairs. We'll say this: depth of consciousness has nothing to do with being minutely aware of your staircase. And we've said that you can keep watching these stairs for the rest of your life, but you'll never gain depth of consciousness. Nothing on the outside is going to give you depth of consciousness inside. If you want depth of consciousness, you need to close your eyes. You need to dive deep into your depths. And when these depths become energized, they gradually start to wake up. This is depth of consciousness. Immediately we can see here that Eckhart's signature teaching is going in the wrong direction. He's having you go outward, looking at the stairs, instead of inwards. But remember, he never had any proper training. All he had to go on was that great experience that he had. But he didn't even understand that experience at first. He had to read many books and learn from other teachers in order to formulate his own theories. Many of his ideas and his terminologies are not actually coming from his own inner experience. He's learned and repeated ideas that he's read from other teachers about living in the moment. And he's taken many of their mistakes as well. And he's pulled it all together to formulate his own teaching. Now, his personal experience is fine. It's genuine. But he's missed the authentic principles of deep meditation. Nothing on the outside, like watching the staircase, is ever going to give you depth of consciousness. And he continues further. Or when you wash your hands, pay attention to all the sense perceptions associated with the activity, the sound and the feel of the water, the movement of your hands, and the scent of the soap, and so on. Again, you can keep washing your hands. You can hear and feel the water. And you can smell the scent of that soap. But none of this is going to give you depth of consciousness. It's an absurd idea. He's telling you to use your senses in the outside world. This is completely opposite to what the ancient meditation masters taught. They said that you're too much with your senses. You need to leave all the senses behind and turn inwards and meditate and dive deep into your inner depths. Buddha never would have agreed that you should keep smelling the scent of the soap and that this is somehow going to lead you to an awakening. This is preposterous. But Eckhart thinks you have to be in the now. And for him, that means experiencing what's happening right in front of you, right now, in front of you. But as we said before, higher consciousness is not about the now. Higher consciousness is seeing beyond the now. And we talked about what this means, to see beyond the now. So if you need to, you can go back and review that session. Now here's where he starts to explain more of his philosophy of living in the now. Listen to this. How to stop creating time. Whoa. Let's just stop right there. He's saying how to stop creating time. Do you think Eckhart knows how to stop creating time? Is he the master of time? We won't even go there. Let's just continue. Realize deeply that the present moment is all you ever have. Make the now the primary focus of your life. Okay, if the present moment is all you ever have, then why do you need to make it the primary focus of your life? Why do you need to focus on it? He just said the present moment is all you ever have. And he says it again right here. Life is now. There was never a time when your life was not now, nor will there ever be. We agree. The now is all you ever have. So what is the need to practice the now? What is the need to make the now the focus of your life when the now is all you ever have? He's playing word games. And this is getting curiouser and curiouser. He says, whereas before you dwelt in time and paid brief visits to the now, have your dwelling place in the now and pay brief visits to past and future. Eckhart seems to think you're some sort of time traveler. He seems to think you can transport yourself to the past or the future, and he doesn't want you to do that. He wants you to be in the now. But he just finished telling us that the now is all you ever have, and there never was a time in your life that was not now, nor will there ever be. And now he's contradicting his own words and telling us that somehow or other, we're not in the now. We've got it all here in writing. And now he's giving us permission that we can pay brief visits to the past and the future, but we should dwell in the now. This is what we call a mind trap. Do you see what's happening? You're starting to get entangled in concepts. You're getting entangled in words. If you start to invest yourself into these ideas, they'll entrap you. A mind trap is something that may sound impressive when you first hear it. It may sound new and different. It may have a popular ring to it, or the sound of authority. It may have a fuzzy logic all its own. But when you look at it carefully, with a level head, it's just nonsense thinking. It's just a bunch of words, and if those words start to make sense to you, then you know you've been caught in the mind trap. And these words make no sense. He says that the present moment is all you ever have, and then he contradicts himself and tells you to stop dwelling in the past or the future. Do you think that just because you're thinking about the past, that somehow you've been transported to the past? Are you a time traveler? I don't think so. If you're thinking about the past, you're in the present moment. You're in the now, thinking about the past. And there's nothing wrong with that. This is not a sin against higher consciousness. You're always in the now, and Eckhart even says so. Eckhart is giving people something like a Zen koan. Have you heard of Zen koans? These are mind traps that Zen masters purposely create for their students. These are nonsense puzzles like, what is the sound of one hand clapping? It's a nonsense question that acts like a mind trap. And in Zen, there's a reason for these mind traps, and we'll talk about that reason. We'll explain to you the secret answer to these koans, like what is the sound of one hand clapping. But here, Eckhart is serious about what he's saying. It's not an intentional puzzle like the Zen masters. Eckhart is unaware that he's created a hamster wheel for his students to run on, which may make you feel like you're traveling far, but in the end, you'll go nowhere. It's just a mind trap, and countless numbers of his students get caught in it. You're never in the past, and you're never in the future. Just because you think of the past or you plan something in the future does not mean you're actually in the past or in the future. You're always here and now. You can never be anywhere else. But if someone like Eckhart gets on TV and tells you that you're not in the now, then that gets you worried. He's told you you have a disease, and now he's going to give you the cure. Watch the staircase. Wash your hands. Smell the soap. Be in the now. This is his advice. This is his cure for a disease that you don't even have. You're already in the now. And now he goes deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. Have you ever experienced, done, thought, or felt anything outside the now? Do you think you ever will? Is it possible for anything to happen or be outside the now? The answer is obvious, is it not? Yes, the answer is obvious. And we agree with you. You have never thought anything outside the now. All your thoughts and feelings are part of the now. Even a thought of the past or the future is part of your now. We agree that everything is in the now. So why do we need a book where we have to practice the now? He's getting you more into his mind trap with conflicting concepts, and he does contradict himself. And these contradictions start to sound a little like crazy talk. And he knows it sounds like crazy talk because then he writes, the essence of what I am saying here cannot be understood by the mind. And if it can't be understood, then why write it in this book? He's going to great lengths to explain all these things. Then he's contradicting himself. And then he tells you that you won't understand it. These are all mind traps. A mind trap is when someone weaves a web of confusing concepts that trap you into false beliefs, which then lead you into fruitless practices based upon those beliefs. First, he's telling you you're always in the now, but then for some reason, you've got to practice being in the now. Did you want to listen too? And off he goes. First, he tells us that we're in the now, and then he tells us we have to practice being in the now. And that practice is watching your staircase or whatever else you happen to be doing. And make sure you don't think about the past or the future. From beginning to end, this is all sheer nonsense. It's one big mind game, one big mind trap. You're always in the now. But then for some reason, you've got to practice being in the now. And that practice is watching your staircase or whatever else you happen to be doing. And make sure you don't think about the past or the future. And this mind trap is going to lead you again and again to odd advice, odd practices, such as here on page 33. Make it your practice to withdraw attention from past and future whenever they are not needed. Step out of the time dimension as much as possible in everyday life. Step out of the time dimension. Do you think you can just step out of the time dimension? Really? Go tell your neighbor that you're going to step out of the time dimension and maybe you'll get a wake-up call. This is a mind game. He's weaving words here that create a wonderful mind trap. He's giving you a solution to all your problems. Just step out of the time dimension. And how do you do that? Watch the staircase. Is this going to help you step out of time? It's nonsense talk. And if you start to believe in all these mind games, you'll start to imagine, oh yes, I've stepped out of the time dimension. Now I'm in the now. And when you start to think like this, be careful. This sort of thinking can lead you to a kind of crazy state. This is not any state of enlightenment. This starts to become an even deeper delusion. Now, we're not saying anything about Eckhart's depth of consciousness. Eckhart's experience, what he has reported, is great. But the understanding of that experience is jumbled. It's not clear-cut. The words he's using to teach you, the concepts he's weaving, these are totally jumbled. And you're going to fall down a rabbit hole big time if you try to understand the maze of his mind and follow these advices. But he's not trying to set mind traps for you. He's not out to deceive you. He's very genuine. He's a good person. He's a gentleman. He's a gentleman. And he's sincere. He's trying his level best to convey his experience. He's trying to help you. But his intellect is too complicated. And it's computing wrong information. And it's leading you into some sort of fairy tale thinking. Look, on page 17, he says, the greatest obstacle to enlightenment is identification with your mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Eckhart seems to think that all the static in your mind is because your mind has become compulsive. You've become a compulsive thinker. That's why you can't turn off your mind. You've gotten into a bad habit. You've become a compulsive thinker. But this is just not the case. Eckhart doesn't seem to understand that the byproducts of stress release are what? Thoughts and emotions. When stress is being processed and burned off, the smoke is thoughts and emotions. It has nothing to do with your mind getting into a bad habit that you need to break. It has nothing to do with your mind becoming compulsive, as he says. The word compulsive makes it sound like you've become some sort of neurotic person, when the reality is that all the static in your mind is perfectly normal and natural. It's the natural result of various stresses that are being processed. There's nothing wrong with the static in your mind. It's performing a job. Now, if you want to get rid of that static, great. There's a way to do that. And that method is called deep meditation. This is what we teach here, OJAYA Deep Meditation. We've said many times, these deep impressions, these scars, the word in yoga is sanskara. These undigested emotions, these stresses, you can either meditate them out or you'll have to live them out. And if they're static in your mind, then you're living them out. You're processing all these scars, the worries, the anxieties, angers, depressions. This static is all coming from those stresses in your system. This is OJAYA 101. It's also Yoga 101. But Eckhart seems unaware of what the ancient meditation masters were teaching. Each stress that's being processed will leak a certain emotion into your consciousness. You're living it out. And this is normal and natural. It's not because your mind has gotten into a wrong habit that you have to break. It's not that your mind has become compulsive. And if you want to get rid of all that junk, we can certainly understand. It's not comfortable. So if you want to process out all that junk very easily, very quickly, then the masters have prescribed deep meditation. Deep meditation is the solution. Now, if we turn to page 40, Eckhart starts to explain how there's no problem in the now. That sounds like quite a slogan, doesn't it? There's no problem in the now. Is this true? Is there no problem in the now? Try telling that to someone in the hospital with severe pain. Go tell them that there's no problem in the now. Do you think this is a helpful philosophy? Tell this to a mother who has just lost her child in some accident. Tell her that there's no problem in the now. Do you think this eases her pain? This is fairy tale thinking. Tell this to someone who has no money to buy food and they're out on the street starving. Tell them there's no problem in the now. Do you think this airy-fairy thinking will help them? This philosophy is impractical. It's Candyland thinking. It might enchant you when you see Eckhart on TV. Maybe you'll think that what he says must be true, otherwise, how could he get on TV? But this sort of thinking is for enchanted fairy stories, not for real life. Fairy tales are great for entertainment, but not for practical living in the real world. Our teaching here is just the opposite. All problems are in the now. Have you ever had a problem that was not in the now? Let me ask it to you this way. Have you ever had a problem? In your entire life, have you ever had a problem? You have? Okay. When you had that problem, in that moment, was that your now? Of course it was your now. How could you ever have a problem outside the now? Remember, Eckhart says that there was never a time when your life was not now, nor will there ever be. So if you ever had a problem in your life, it must have been in that now. But now he says there's no problem in the now. This is the mind trap. We're getting ensnared in words and concepts. If you start to believe that there's no problem in the now, you're setting yourself up for some serious cognitive dissonance. I like this term, cognitive dissonance. Dissonance is the opposite of being in tune. If a musical instrument is out of tune, it creates dissonance. So if you have cognitive dissonance, your beliefs and your philosophies don't match up with reality. And this is what happens if you get caught into this mind trap. If you start to think, as Eckhart says, that there's no problem in the now. He may have his own fuzzy logic about why there's no problem in the now, but these are all word games. When Oprah asked Eckhart about this point, he said, there's no problem in the now, only challenges in the now. But he's playing word games. The plain fact is, all your problems, all your challenges, whatever you want to call them, are only in the now. And if you start to make believe that there are no problems in your now, then you can start to live in a fantasy land. You can start to lose touch with reality. There may be lots of problems or challenges, but you can keep telling yourself, nope, there's no problem right now. But the next moment, those problems are going to be right there to greet you. You can construct a fairy tale castle in the air and believe what you want, but the moment you step out of that castle and walk into the real world, all your beliefs and philosophies are going to crumble. But you know, in Eckhart's defense, we can certainly understand what he's trying to tell people. He's trying to say that there's a depth of your consciousness that is not touched by problems. We've talked about this here in the rainforest, here in our sessions many times. And here's an example of what he says. You become like a deep lake. The outer situation of your life, whatever happens there, is the surface of the lake. Sometimes calm, sometimes windy and rough, according to the cycles and seasons. Deep down, however, the lake is always undisturbed. You are the whole lake, not just the surface, and you are in touch with your own depth, which remains absolutely still. This is very beautiful, very beautifully said. So nice to read this in his book. And where have you heard this before? We've said this many times here in our training here. There's a depth of consciousness inside you that is undisturbed by the things outside in your daily life. So Eckhart definitely has the experience of depth of consciousness. We've never said otherwise. But he's using the wrong words when he explains his experience. We call it depth of consciousness, and he calls it the now. But his words are a very poor choice, because then he says there's no problem in the now. But that doesn't make any sense. We all know that all problems are in our now. He could have said, problems cannot touch you at the depths of your consciousness. That would have been the better thing to say. It has nothing to do with any so-called now. It has to do with your depth of consciousness. He should have never called his book The Power of Now. He should have called it The Power of Consciousness. The power of depth of consciousness. The words you choose will set the student in a particular direction. Words matter. If you say the power of now, then people are going to get the wrong idea. They're going to get caught in that mind trap. They're going to get more and more into this idea of the now. They're going to constantly be watching the staircase and the water and the soap and all this nonsense. They'll adopt all kinds of mental gymnastics to get more and more into the so-called now. But it's not going to lead people into depth of consciousness. That's what you get when you call your book The Power of Now. But if you call the book The Power of Consciousness, and throughout the book you change the word now to consciousness, then this makes more sense. It sets people in the correct direction. Now people understand that the power is in the depths of their consciousness. They're not going to watch the stairs anymore. They're not going to stare while they wash their hands. They're not going to look at anything in the outer world. If you say the power of consciousness, then they're going to close their eyes and dive deep within their own consciousness. They're going to practice the classic techniques of deep meditation. There's no question of watching any staircase. Words matter. Whatever words you use, that's going to set the student in a certain direction. There's no power in the now. This is a big boo-boo. The power is in the depths of your own consciousness. The now is a phantom. You'll never find a thing called the now. You can look and stare, and you'll never find anything called the now, because the now is only a concept in your mind. It's just an idea. Even thoughts of the past and the future are the now. The ancient meditation masters did not tell people to carefully watch the so-called now, and they didn't say to watch the staircase as a means to depth of consciousness. No, that is not a classic technique. For thousands of years, the ancient masters have taught that the most powerful classic technique is how to use the resonance of a mantra to pull the awareness inwards. These mantras are special musical sounds that energize and awaken the depths of your consciousness. This is their technique. This is how they gained their powers of consciousness. You should not be looking for a power of now. You should be looking for the power within your own consciousness. If you have faith in Eckhart's teaching, if you're a believer, if you get entrapped into this kind of thinking, then yes, it might seem like it's working for you. If you have disturbing thoughts in your mind, worries, problems, and you bring your attention to the left hand, then yes, you might feel some relief from that. Eckhart says that if your mind is worrying about the future, you can bring your attention to the left hand because your left hand is in the now. But this is not a solution. It's an illusion. That's the mind trap. You haven't solved any problem. The worries are still festering there inside you. You've just distracted yourself for a few moments by looking at your left hand. This is not a teaching. This is some sort of diversion. Your left hand will not lead you to depth of consciousness. Your left hand will not help you dissolve the scars. Your left hand will not help you to process out all the junk that's sitting there in your consciousness. The ancient masters would never approve of this method. This is some idea that Eckhart has thought up. And this brings us to an even more important problem with Eckhart's teachings. Now we're going to see how he's giving out dangerous advice to his students. And yes, I said dangerous advice. On page 64, he says, "Let your spiritual practice be this. As you go about your life, don't give 100% of your attention to the external world and to your mind. Keep some within." He's saying, as you go about your life, you should not give 100% of your attention to what you're doing. You should keep some of your attention within. This, he says, is his spiritual practice. Would you like to take this advice? Would you tell your son or daughter, now, whenever you do your homework, never give 100% of your attention on what you're doing. Just keep some of your awareness away from the homework and keep your awareness inside. Will you say this to your son or daughter? Oh, and by the way, when you're listening to your teacher in school, don't listen 100%. Give the teacher just 90% of your attention and keep 10% for yourself. Is this the advice you will give as a parent? Oh, and by the way, whenever you drive the car, don't pay full attention to the road. Give the road maybe 90% of your attention. But whenever you drive, keep some of your awareness inside. Will you give this advice to your son or daughter? And Eckhart tells us this is his spiritual practice. Listen again. Let your spiritual practice be this. As you go about your life, don't give 100% of your attention to the external world and to your mind. Keep some within. Even when engaged in everyday activities, especially when engaged in relationships. In other words, when you're talking with somebody, don't be with them 100%, just be with them 90%. Can you believe this? What he's saying? Feel the stillness deep inside. This is the state we call enlightenment. This is the state we call enlightenment. You call it enlightenment when you don't give 100% of your attention to what is in front of you? Wow, that's really confusing, because just before he told us the opposite, we've got it in writing here, folks, remember? He told us to be fully present with the stairs. He says, every time you walk up and down the stairs, pay close attention to every step. Be totally present. And on page 50, he says, wherever you are, be there totally. But now he's telling us not to be totally present as you go about your life. Do not put 100% of your attention on something. Keep some of your attention within. His word games are so complex that even he is getting confused. And we've got it all here, right here in writing. You can read it for yourself. And why is he confused? The reason is Eckhart's experience is not the be-all and end-all. And he himself doesn't even fully understand his own experience. Now listen carefully. Here's where he really shows his cards, and now you'll be able to see how he's actually misunderstood what higher consciousness is. He says, the enlightened person's main focus of awareness is always the now, but they are still peripherally aware of time. This is a wrong idea about the state of so-called enlightenment. A so-called enlightened person is not peripherally aware of time. A so-called enlightened person's awareness of time is no different from yours or anyone else in the world. But in addition, and I say in addition, there's also a deep inner awareness. So Eckhart has now shown us, he thinks that somehow an enlightened person's awareness is divided. He's saying that enlightened awareness is divided between the now and a peripheral awareness of time. And a few minutes ago, he was telling you to put 90% of your awareness on something out there and keep 10% for yourself. He thinks enlightened awareness is like a pie, and you have to divide it up. This demonstrates that he does not yet experience and understand a more developed state of awakening. We know that when you meditate, you gradually awaken those deeper levels of your consciousness. And this leads to 24-hour depth of awareness. Your inner wakefulness is 24/7. We call it witnessing, like we talked about in a previous session. Even while you sleep, there's deep inner wakefulness. We talked about this, remember? This depth of consciousness you gain is in addition to your usual surface levels of consciousness. It's not taking your awareness and dividing it up. I don't recall Eckhart talking about any experience of deep inner wakefulness during sleep. Eckhart seems to think you have to split your awareness, say 90% outside and 10% inside. This is a very dangerous philosophy. It's worse than his staircase method. Remember, he was telling us we have to be fully present with the stairs. He said fully present. Now, that's a fruitless technique, but at least it's harmless. Being aware of the stairs is not going to harm you. But now he's telling you to create some sort of split awareness. some sort of split personality. Part of your attention should be engaged outside, and part of you should not be engaged. But this is not the experience of a so-called enlightened person. Listen carefully. The awakened awareness is not split, like he's saying. You can be 100% reading the book, and at the same time, there's 100% inner wakefulness. The full range of your consciousness is not a pie that you have to split. Inner wakefulness does not take away any of your awareness or focus from the outside world. Inner wakefulness means the addition, I repeat, the addition of inner depth, not a division of awareness into 90%, 10%. Like we said in previous talks, you're living from your depth. In fact, only when you have inner wakefulness can you be deeply present to the outside world, because there's deep clarity. There's no static in your mind to distract you. Eckhart is giving you a wrong idea, an immature idea of what this state of awakening is. Never try to split your awareness. This is dangerous. This is unhealthy for your mind and your emotions. This is a very wrong philosophy. And Eckhart should immediately withdraw this advice and never again suggest such a practice to his students. Never try to split your awareness like this, 90% on listening to your friend and keep 10% to yourself. You'll drive yourself crazy doing things like this. This is not the state of awakening. This is a forgery. If you fall into this mind trap, you can convince yourself that you've gained some sort of inner consciousness, but in reality, you're just splitting your mind. You're splitting your awareness. You're flickering back and forth between the outside world and the inner world. The enlightened person does not flicker. Listen carefully. The so-called enlightened person does not flicker back and forth like he's saying. Eckhart is all the time telling you to flicker. He says you can pay brief visits to the past and future, but live mostly in the now. He's telling people to flicker from past to future to now. But the awakened consciousness does not flicker like this. The inner awareness is always lit, 24 hours in the day. And there's no need to ever practice being in the now, because whether you're enlightened or not, whether you have depth of consciousness or not, you're always in the now. Splitting your awareness is not the way to gain a state of awakening. Splitting your awareness leads to a kind of zombie mind. It makes you dull and lackluster. You'll lose your dynamic energies. You'll become more and more like some kind of cyborg. Awakening cannot happen by these kinds of manipulations. Awakening happens when you dive deep in your meditation, and gradually these deep levels get energized. They become more alert. It's not a willful act that you can decide, like today, okay, I'm going to have 90% awareness outside, and I'll keep 10% awareness inside. This is a delusion. These are wrong ideas that Eckhart has conjured up. And he's become entangled in his own web of concepts. And Eckhart's book is full of these mind traps. We've just scratched the surface here. Maybe some other time we can go through the book in detail, but right now these were some examples for you. There are so many people out there that are setting mind traps for people. These are not bad people. They're sincere people. They themselves have fallen into their own mind traps. But I want you to be aware that not everything you hear is true. Just because someone has written a book or someone is on a TV show, something may sound profound. It may intrigue you. But when you really look into it, it's just simple nonsense. And if you start to invest yourself into nonsense, then maybe that nonsense will start to make sense to you. And when nonsense starts to make sense, then you've definitely fallen into the mind trap. We're not trying to pick on Eckhart Tolle. Eckhart is just our example for today. There are mind traps everywhere. I want you to watch carefully whenever you hear anyone teach about higher consciousness. Don't accept ideas just because someone's famous or it sounds like a popular saying. You need to wake up your deeper intelligence and your common sense. Mind traps allure you because they appeal to your mind. A mind trap has some kind of fuzzy logic to it. It doesn't fully make sense, but that's what intrigues you. That's what you love about it. Because when something doesn't make complete sense, it gives you a lot of leeway for your own interpretations. It gives you a sense of wonder. And you can craft your own philosophy from that. A mind trap keeps you wondering and wandering for decades, and in the end, you'll realize that it was all just a wild goose chase. You won't end up in the promised land. You'll end up right where you started, with all the same scars, all the same challenges, right here in the now, the same now that you were searching for all along. So watch out for clever word games and airy-fairy thinking and all sorts of nonsense. Just meditate. Leave all these ideas and concepts behind. Meditation is what the ancient masters recommend. It has nothing to do with smelling your soap. Just meditate deeply, and you'll escape from all these mind traps.
OJAYA Deep Meditation is the simplest, the easiest, the most powerful, and most blissful meditation you'll find anywhere. Join Sukaishi David in the Earthborn Rainforest online classroom.
You just watch the video and take the quiz, and you're done.
Sukaishi shows you secrets of deep meditation that were forgotten for centuries. Sukaishi compares meditation methods taught today in schools around the world. You'll learn how these methods have been watered down over the centuries and why they no longer qualify as deep meditation. You'll learn to avoid common mistakes that prevent you from resting deep in meditation. Do you now practice any meditation technique? If so, is your meditation easy, effortless, and energizing? As you meditate, are you calm, serene, at peace? Whether you've practiced meditation for years or you're starting right now, completely fresh, the OJAYA course contains a wondrous knowledge that will uplift you immediately. If you wish to learn these ancient teachings, then start now at OJAYA.com. You never know what will happen next in the Earthborn Rainforest. OJAYA Deep Meditation. Start now.